Dan stood frozen at the altar, his eyes fixed on the empty space where Angel had once stood. The priest's words still echoed in his mind. Angel, do you take Dan to be your lawfully wedded husband? The silence that followed was deafening, and then the sound of her voice, shrill and loud. No. The word pierced his heart like a dagger. He remembered the countless times they had laughed together, the fights they had settled with love, and the promises they had made to each other. For years of their relationship flashed before his eyes, and he couldn't understand why she had chosen this moment to walk away. He had done everything for her, for them, for their future. He had worked hard to make her happy, to make her family happy. As the reality of the situation sunk in, Don's body began to shake, and tears streamed down his face. He felt like he was drowning in a sea of pain and confusion. Why had she done this to him? Why had she left him without any explanation? The questions swirled in his mind, but he couldn't find any answers. Outside the church, Angel's parents walked out, their faces expressionless, their eyes avoiding Don's. The guests looked on in shock and sympathy, whispering to each other about the unexpected turn of events. Don's parents, who had warned him about the relationship, were nowhere to be seen, but he knew they would be waiting for him outside, their words of "I told you so" hanging in the air. As Dan stood there, broken and shattered, he saw Angel's car speeding away, leaving behind a cloud of dust and his shattered dreams. He felt like his world had come crashing down, and he was left to pick up the pieces of his shattered heart. As Dan kept crying, Don's parents rushed to his side, their faces etched with concern. His mother wrapped him in a warm hug, while his father said some reassuring words. "We're here for you, son," his father whispered softly. "We'll get through this together," the mother added. Dan nodded, still reeling from the shock. He took a moment to collect himself before announcing, "I need to go to Angel's house." His parents exchanged worried glances, but they didn't try to stop him. As he sped to Angel's house, his heart pounded in his chest. When he arrived, he saw Angel's car parked outside, and his heart skipped a beat. He stormed out of his car and rushed to the door, ringing the bell impatiently. The door opened, and Angel stood before him, smiling brightly. But Don's attention was drawn to the man standing behind her, his arm possessively draped around her waist. Don's eyes widened as he took in the man's designer watch and tailored suit. "Dan, what are you doing here?" Angel asked, her voice dripping with nonchalance. The man stepped forward, his smile gleaming with wealth and confidence. "I'm Richard," Angel single quotes S. Friend. "We're about to leave for a business trip abroad." Don's eyes locked onto Angel's, and he saw the truth. She had left him at the altar for someone with more money because material wealth was all she truly cared about. The realization pierced him like a knife, and something inside him shifted. He turned around and walked away, a newfound determination burning within him. Years went by and Dan threw himself into the business world, determined to make it big. He worked tirelessly, and his hard work paid off. He became a successful entrepreneur, amassing a fortune. Despite being successful, he didn't have any relationship. He avoided emotional entanglement and only had flings and one-night stands. Despite the women flocking around him, he didn't boast. They were all after his money, he thought. As Don's success grew, so did the pressure from his parents to settle down. "It's time to start a family, son," his mother would say. Dan would nod, but his heart wasn't in it. One day, his parents approached him with a proposal. They would arrange a marriage for him with a suitable partner. Dan agreed, still numb to the idea of love. The day Dan met his bride-to-be, Phoebe, he was indifferent, but he couldn't deny her beauty. She was reserved, with a quiet elegance that intrigued him. As they exchanged brief words, he noticed her sparkling eyes and gentle smile. For a moment, he felt a flicker of attraction, but he quickly suppressed it. Dan had made it clear that he wanted a simple wedding, despite his wealth and his parents' insistence on a grand affair. In the end, his wishes prevailed, and the ceremony was held with just a handful of close friends and family in attendance. On the wedding night, Phoebe was on his bed expecting intimacy since it's their first night together. Immediately he saw her on her beautiful simple nightie. He had the urge to touch her, kiss her, but he quickly suppressed it. As he stood in the room of his mansion, Phoebe smiled shyly and said, "I have been waiting for you." Don's gaze swept over her, his expression unreadable. "We're married now," he stated bluntly. "I got married to make my parents happy. That's all this is. I expect you to respect my boundaries. We will have separate bedrooms, and you will stay out of my business. I don't want any emotional entanglements." Phoebe's eyes widened, her face pale. "Boundaries," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Dan said, his tone firm. Phoebe's heart sank, but she nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "I understand," she said softly. As Dan turned to leave, Phoebe's eyes followed him, her heart heavy with unspoken questions. What had happened to him? Why was he so closed off? And could she ever reach the man behind the walls he had built? Phoebe truly wanted her marriage to work. From the moment she met Dan, she had been drawn to him so much so that she agreed to the arranged marriage, hoping love would follow. She had believed that once they were married, Dan would eventually open up to her. But now, with separate rooms and invisible walls between them, she couldn't help but wonder, why the distance? Why the boundaries? These questions swirled in her mind as she drifted off to sleep. The next morning, Phoebe began exploring her new home, a vast mansion that felt more like a labyrinth. She tread carefully, afraid she might actually lose her way. As she wandered, a thought occurred to her. Perhaps she could make breakfast for Dan, a small gesture to bring them closer. After some searching, she finally found the kitchen, only to be greeted by a maid. The woman smiled politely and informed her that Dan had already left for work. The news hit Phoebe like a wave. He left without even saying a word. She forced a smile when the maid offered her food but politely declined, her appetite lost. On her way back to her room, Phoebe stumbled upon Don's. Curiosity got the better of her, and she stepped inside, hoping to understand the coldness in his eyes, the distance in his voice. As she searched, she found a photograph Dan with a woman she recognized from Whispers. Angel, his ex. The way Dan looked at her in that photo, his eyes full of love, made everything click. She must have broken his heart. In that quiet moment, Phoebe made a promise to herself. She would do everything she could to win his heart. She loved him and she wanted desperately to be loved in return. Later that night, Dan returned home, heavily drunk. His friend Ethan had insisted on drinks to celebrate the marriage, and Dan hadn't known when to stop. Ethan helped him inside, and as they entered, Phoebe rushed over to assist. Ethan handed Dan over with a grin and left them alone. Dan, too intoxicated to resist, leaned on Phoebe as she helped him to his room. Then suddenly, he pulled her close, his arms wrapping tightly around her. Her heart skipped a beat. He looked at her not with cold detachment, but with burning desire, and kissed her deeply. The kiss was fiery, full of emotion. Phoebe's body responded, her longing surfacing. But she stopped herself. Not like this, she thought. Not when he's drunk. Gently, she guided him to bed, tucked him in, and returned to her own room. As she lay down, the memory of the kiss replayed in her mind, a smile tugging at her lips. For the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. Dan woke up with a pounding headache and fragments of the night before flooding back the drinks, the kiss that drove him crazy, and then his beautiful wife Phoebe. He remembered how much he had wanted her, how real the moment felt. But she had stopped him. Why didn't she feel it too? The attraction was undeniable. Yet he reminded himself, they only want the money. No one stays for me. Trying to get up, he collapsed back onto the bed, groaning. Moments later, Phoebe entered, concern in her eyes. She rushed to him, but he turned away. "I don't need your help," he muttered. "You always push me away," she said quietly. "Please, let me help." She touched his forehead. He was burning up. Without waiting, she carefully removed the suit, gave him medicine, cooled him with a damp cloth, and fed him until he drifted to sleep. Hours later, Dan woke feeling better. He looked over and saw Phoebe asleep on the couch, clearly exhausted. She looked peaceful, beautiful. Something in him softened. Gently, he carried her to the bed. As he laid her down, her eyes fluttered open. Their gazes locked. And then he kissed her tender, slow, full of everything he'd been holding back. Phoebe responded, pulling him close. The kiss deepened, hands explored, clothes slipped away. He moved gently, attentive to her hesitations. She winced slightly, and he paused, but she nodded. Slowly, they became one. It wasn't just desire, it was something deeper. Afterward, as she lay sleeping beside him, Dan got up and saw the faint blood on the sheets. It hit him she had been a virgin. The care in her eyes, the patience, the way she gave herself to him, it was all real. She wasn't like the others. She was pure, and she was his. Right then, Dan made a silent vow to cherish her, protect her, and give her the love she deserved. The days that followed were pure bliss for Dan and Phoebe. He pampered her with romantic dinners, boat cruises, spontaneous getaways, and breakfast in bed. After 9 months together, his love had only grown deeper. Phoebe, once neglected by her cold husband, now felt truly cherished. In Don's eyes, she saw passion, warmth, and devotion. But not everyone was happy. Angel, Don's ex, was heartbroken. The man she left Dan at the altar for turned out to be married with children, alone and filled with regret, especially after learning Dan had become wealthy. She rushed back, unaware he had quietly married Phoebe. Dressed seductively, Angel appeared at Don's mansion, boldly introducing herself to the maid as his fiancée. The confused maid went to call on her boss. When Dan came downstairs with Phoebe, he was stunned and angry. Why would she say that? Phoebe whispered, shaken. In the living room, Angel greeted Dan with a forced smile, ignoring Phoebe. I'm ready now. I'm sorry I left you. Let's get married. Dan stared in disbelief. Then he turned to Phoebe and said, I'm already married. This is my wife. You walking away led me to her, my true love. He dropped to one knee. Phoebe, we never got our dream wedding. Let's have it now. Will you marry me again? Through tears, Phoebe smiled. Yes. And I'm 2 months pregnant. Don's face lit up. He kissed her belly, whispering, I love you so much. She responded, I love you too. Angel, devastated, stood frozen. Then she turned and left, realizing too late that she had given up gold while chasing shadows. The story teaches us that what first appears to be a painful ending can actually be the beginning of something beautiful. Don's heartbreak turned out to be a blessing in disguise, leading him to a deeper, more genuine love. It reminds us to appreciate those who truly value us, and to never chase after people or things that aren't meant for us. The end. Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories.